Alright, welcome to part 4 of the quest system tutorial. So in the last one we got it set up so that you could press tab and it would open up this little quest menu. But currently it's just showing our quests as text block and we can't really click them to expand them. So let's go ahead and work on that. So to do that we want to open up the objective widget inside the UI folder. So double click on that to open it up. So inside of here we can just start out by deleting these events because we don't really need them. The one we want to add is event on list item object set. And that one you can see is over here on list item object set. And that comes from, if you remember, we added the user object list entry interface to this class. And when we did that, it gave us these functions or these events that we can implement. So we want to implement this one, so you can just right click on it and say implement function. If you don't see these over here on the left, you're probably on an older version of Unreal, and you can find them by right-clicking and searching for them, and then they should show up, and you can just implement them that way. Okay, so this event gets called, if you don't already know this about list views, this event gets called when an item is added to the list, or in our case, the tree view. So it gives us an object, and we know that this object is actually an objective, so we can cast it to an objective. So we'll say cast to objective, like so. And then we want to save this so we can reference it later. So we'll promote it to a variable, and we'll rename it to the objective, and we can set it to private as well. And now that we have the objective saved, the first thing we want to do is we want to change it so that the text shows the name of the widget and not just text block. So to do that, we can come back over here and let's rename this text, this bottom one here, to something else. We'll call this the objective name text. Compile that, come back here. Oh, and we need to make it a variable. So actually, one more thing, come back here, select it, and hit is variable at the top. And we'll go back to the graph, and then we should see it over here. Drag this in, and say set text. Set text. Hook that up. And the text we want to set it to is going to be the name of the objective. So we can just drag off this and say get objective name and plug that in like so. Oh, this is complaining because this wants a text and this is a name. So maybe we should change the objective name to be a text instead. So double click on get objective name real quick. And let's change this objective name from a name to a text, like so, and hit yes. And then we're going to need to change this function to also return a text. And then we can just refresh this guy and hook this up, compile, save. And now back here, or sorry, back in our, where were we, objective widget. If we refresh this node as well, you can see now it returns the correct thing. So we're just having it return a text because that's what the widget wants. So it makes our lives easier. Okay. And then, oh, that's gonna, well, we'll fix it later, but that's gonna change something. We'll fix it later though. Okay. So now that we've set the text, well, let's see if that works because we should probably fix this other thing first. Let's go back to the our BP Quest 01 and let's refresh this guy. So once we refresh it, you see it change the type of the objective name because we just changed it from a name to a text. And so we want to call this inside of populate objectives. We want to call this reach megaton. And then we also need to change it inside of construct root object collection. We want to refresh this and retype in here a long way home. Okay. So now that you fixed both of those, we can hit play. And if we hit tab, you can see it now shows a long way home. So that's a step in the right direction at least. So let's go back to our objective widget. The next thing we need to do is we need to add the child objectives to this root objective so that when we expand on it, or when we expand it, it shows all the child objectives. So to do that, we can take this objective that gets passed in. So let's just drag in that objective and let's cast it. So we'll say cast to obj collection, so objective collection. And the reason we're casting it is because this objective may or may not be an objective collection, depending on obviously the type of it. But if it is an objective collection, then we want to go ahead and add all of its sub-objectives to our tree view. And if it's not, then we don't really need to do anything. So if it is, we want to do a for each loop. So let's get the objectives. So we'll say objectives and get the objectives. And then we'll do a for each. So we're going to loop over all of the sub-objectives inside of this objective collection. And for each one of those, we just want to add to our tree view. So again, let's maybe name this something different. Let's go back here. If you remember, our tree view is under here, and it just represents all of the children of this objective. So let's just call it our object, or maybe we should call it our sub objectives tree view, something like that, just so it has a better name. And so let's drag in our sub objectives tree view, and we'll say add item. And of course, the item we want to add is our object, or our objective, rather. Okay. Now, the next thing we need to do is hook it up so that when the item is clicked, it becomes expanded, and then when it's clicked again, it becomes like unexpanded, basically. So let me think here. To do that, let's go back here to our designer tab. If you remember, we have this button here. And so when the button is pressed, we want to expand it or collapse it, depending on its current state. So let's click on the button and then scroll down. All the way to the bottom, we have this OnClicked event. So we want to implement this. So hit this little plus, this green plus button. So now this event is going to get called whenever the objective is clicked on in the UI. So the first thing we want to do is we want to check if the item is currently expanded. And if it is, we want to collapse it. And if it isn't, we want to expand it. So we basically just want to toggle it, right? So to do that, you can check if an item is currently expanded using the list view. But we're currently inside of the objective, which is a child of the list view. So to get the list view that we're inside of, we can use this handy get owning list view. And then we can cast this to a tree view because we're actually using a tree view. And a list view is just the parent class. And then from there, we can say set item expansion. And the item we want to expand is our objective, so drag in the objective. And then the expand item is either going to be true or false, depending on if we want to expand it or not. And to check if it's currently expanded, we can just say is list item expanded. And then we'll just say not, so that we flip it. So this is essentially just going to toggle the expanded view on and off, or the expanded state on or off. So that doesn't actually physically expand it, that just tells the system that we want to expand it. In order to actually expand it, we need to implement this on item expansion changed. So let's go ahead and right click on this and say implement function. And I'm going to drag it up here, just so it's next to this other one that we've done. So this is going to get called whenever we call this, and it's going to tell us whether or not it should currently be expanded or not. So we want to, ultimately, what we want to do when it gets expanded is we want to change the visibility of this tree view. Because if you remember over here, our tree view is down here, and if it had items in it, it would look something like this. So when it's expanded, we want it to look like this. And when it's not expanded, we want it to look like this. And so to do that, we're going to be changing the visibility of it from collapsed to visible, basically. So let's drag in our sub-object tree view and, drag it in and say get, and then say set, if I can type, set visibility. And again, we're going to set the visibility based off this boolean. So we're going to use a select node. So we'll say select, and then drag the return value into the invisibility. And now we can just simply select what we want to do. So when expanded is true, we want to set it to not hit testable. And again, not hit testable is, it's the same as visible, but you just can't click on it. And we obviously don't want to be able to click on these because we're handling the click with the button. And then if it is not expanded, so it's collapsed, then we want to set it to collapsed. All right. So let's see, this might work. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I missed. We'll see what this does here real quick. So let's run this and press tab. So we got a long way home. If we click it, you can see it adds this reach megaton, which is the only objective in it currently. And if we click it again, it collapses. And we can just do that over and over. So that seems to be working pretty well. But there's a few other things we want to do for this to make it a little bit nicer. So for example, in my original, or in my video that I showed at the beginning to show you guys an example of how this was going to look, I had it set up so this little character on the left here changed depending on if it was expanded or not. We also had it set up so that the text appeared kind of grayed out if it hadn't been completed yet. So let's do both of those things first. So to do that, it's actually pretty straightforward. For the color, if we come over here and we select our text, we can create a binding to it. So we can bind the text color based on some values. So up here where it says color and opacity, we want to just say create binding. And when we do that, it creates a function for us. So it created this little handy function for us, and it named it pretty horribly. So I'm going to rename it to get name text color. And what I like to do for functions that I'm using just for binding, I like to set them to private because there's really no reason they need to be public. And they can also be const because obviously they're not changing anything, they're just binding. And I like to add them to their own binding category. So we'll just add this to a binding category, and there we go. So for this function, we want to change the color of the text depending on if the objective is complete. So to do that, it's pretty straightforward. We just drag in the objective. We say get is complete, and then we can do a select. Now, we're going to split this return value so we can only edit the color. So split struct pin, and then we're going to drag the return value into the color. And now all we have to do is select the colors we want to use. So if it's complete, we want it to be white. So we'll use white, which is just 111. And then if it's not complete, we want to use some sort of gray color. Oh, I have to sneeze, hold on. All right, sorry. If it's not complete, we want to use some gray color. Again, you can use any color you want for these, obviously. I'm just going to use gray. Okay, so let's see how this works now. If we run this, press tab, you can see it's gray and they're both gray. And they're going to stay gray for right now because we don't have really any way to complete them yet. But you'll see once we write the code to be able to complete them, hopefully they'll show up as white. All right, and then the next thing is this little character here. So to do that, we want to change it from this symbol to this symbol whenever we expand it. So to do that, we can just hit the little bind button and say create binding. And then just like we did for the other binding that we created, I'm going to rename this to get expand symbol. I'm going to move it into the binding category. I'm going to set it to private and const. So this one is also pretty simple. We just want to change the symbol based on if the item can be expanded or not. So let me think here. Is list item expandable? Where is list item expanded? Okay, so to do this, let's see. Let's grab the objective. And the first thing we want to do is we want to cast it to an objective collection. Because if it's not a collection, then we know it's going to use the dash line because obviously we can't expand it if it's not a collection. So cast to BP OBJ collection. And like I said, if it's not, so if the cast failed, then we just want to, I'm just going to copy this return value. We're just going to go ahead and return a dash or a minus sign, basically. But if it does succeed, then we want to check if it's currently expanded or not. Because if it's expanded, we want to show the dash. If it's not expanded, we want to show the arrow. So we'll say is list, or if I can type, is list item expanded, and then we'll do a select node and hook that up to the return value and hook that up to true. So if it is expanded, we want to use the subtract sign. If it's not expanded, we want to use the greater than sign. So now if we try this, come over here, you can see it has the little greater than sign, and then when we hit it, it changes to this the dash sign, and then this one also has the dash sign because we can't expand it either. All right. And then what else do we have here? Get objective visibility. Yes. We're going to do this one as well right now. So the get objective visibility, we want to make sure that objectives that are not currently active are not currently showing. So to do that, let me double check where I did this on my other one. Visibility. 1 second, sorry. Yes, we did it for the uniform grid panel. Okay. Okay, so yeah, so the idea is that we want to hide this whole thing if it's not currently active so that we don't see it in the list. So to do that, we want to use this uniform grid panel here, and we want to hide it. So if we select it and we search for visibility, we want to bind to this. So we'll say create binding again. And just like before, we're going to drag this up here into the binding category. And we're going to rename it to get objective visibility. And I'm going to make it private and const. Okay, so for get objective visibility, we just want to make it visible if it's active, and we want to make it collapsed or hidden if it is not active. So again, pretty straightforward. Drag this in. We'll say get is active, and then we'll do a select, and hook that up to the return value. So if it is active, we want to set it to visible. Otherwise, somebody's calling me. Just ignore them. Wait, do we want to set it to visible? I don't think we do. I think we want to set it to, because we have this set to, yeah, we want to set it to not hit testable, rather. So set this to not hit testable if it's true, and then if it's false, we want to set it to collapsed. And you won't be able to see this working yet because we don't have any inactive quests, but as soon as we add more, or sorry, we don't have any inactive objectives, but as soon as we add some more objectives to this particular quest, you'll see that they don't show up until they become active. So I'll point that out once we get there. And then the final thing we want to do is we want to make it so that this button is not clickable if it doesn't need to be. So the reason we're doing that is because we don't need any of these events to be firing if we're clicking on a button or an objective that doesn't have any expand capabilities. So if it can't expand, we just want to disable this button, basically. So to do that, we're going to search for enabled, make sure you have the button selected, and we want to bind to it. So again, create binding, and drag it up to the binding category, set it to private, and set it to const. And then for this one, we're going to call it get button enabled. And this one's going to be pretty straightforward. We just want to, it wants to be enabled if it is an object collection and it actually has objectives. So we will drag in our objective. We will cast to our objective collection. So if it's not an objective collection, it's just a normal objective, then we want to return false. So I'm going to copy this, paste, and return false because we're saying Like there's no reason you need to click on this button because you can't expand it anyways. But if it is an objective collection, we want to check if it has any objectives. So we'll say, actually, we don't really need to check this because if you have an objective collection with no collection in it, then like, what are you really doing with your life at that point? So we'll just go ahead and return true because it doesn't really make any sense other way. Yeah, so I think that is pretty good. So again, let me just make sure this all works. So oh, we killed it. What did we do? We must have done this wrong. Not self-testable. Git is active. I'm guessing, hold on, don't actually do this. I'm guessing this is messing it up. Yeah, it is. So that's fine. So keep this hooked up because we probably just have something wrong with the Git is active. I think we just are not setting that correctly. So let's go back and double check where we're setting that. So let's see. So BP objective, if we look at this real quick, I'm just trying to figure out the problem right now. So activate objective, we're setting active to true. That seems correct. And then we also have our BP objective collection and our activate objective in here. We call our parent function, so that should be setting it. But let's look at our objective reach destination. So activate objective. No, that's calling it as well. Is this getting called? 1 second. Okay, that's never getting called. Why is that never getting called? Objective collection. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. Hold on. That's never being called. Oh, I don't think we ever activated the quest. So let's go back to VP quests, go to the event graph. Oh yeah, okay, so we have our to do here, which is activate the root objective. So we need to drag the root objective in and say activate objective. And now it should probably work. Let me remove my breakpoints here, 1 second. Okay, so now we hit this, and now it's working as intended. Okay, so yeah, make sure, oh, we have an error. Error accessing none, trying to read property destination. Oh, okay, that's fine because we haven't quite filled that out yet. So let's go, where should we go next? Let's go to our world here, and the problem that it's complaining about right now is that we have this quest in our level, and it's expecting us to specify a trigger location for Megaton, but we have not done that yet. So I'm just going to real quickly set up a little scene here. I'm not going to do it as elaborate as I did in the video at the beginning, but we're just going to make some little platforms real quick just so we can kind of see what's going on. Just going to drag in a box here, and we're just going to kind of squish it down, put it in the floor a little just so we can walk on it. So this will be Megaton. If you hold down Alt and drag, it will make a copy. This will be whatever our other city is, and this will be our other one. And then we're just going to add some little text thing here, a text renderer, just so we can see what's going on. So this will be, we'll just call this Megaton. I forget what I called the other ones. Anchorage, I think. Let me see. Yeah, Anchorage. Anchorage. And then the other one we called Springville or whatever. Springville. Okay. So we need trigger boxes to indicate the bounds of these. So let's come over here and add a trigger box and put it on here. Just kind of expand it a little bit. Doesn't really have to be perfect for this. And then let's rename it to something more meaningful. So we'll call it Megaton trigger. Now, again, the cool thing about this is that you can actually use any type of these collisions. Like if you have a city or something or a destination that's like a sphere or more of a cylinder or whatever, you could use like a sphere trigger and it would work just fine. So I'll show you that for this one. So we'll use a sphere trigger and we'll call this one anchorage trigger, and then I'm just going to copy this guy, copy this guy, and we'll call it Springville trigger. Okay, so now we have our 3 little cities and our 3 little triggers. So if we click on our quest again, actually let me rebuild the lighting so it's not so ugly. Should be really fast. Give it a hot second. Okay, so let's click on our little quest here, and it's asking for the Megaton trigger. So we will select this, and we will select our Megaton trigger. So now it's tied to that one. So if we save this, and then let's go ahead and hit play, open this up. So we got a long way home, and it says reach Megaton. So if we close this, let's see what happens if we go over here and we hit this. So we hit it, and you can see this is now showing as white. And if we expand it, this is showing as white as well. And so the quest is now complete. But obviously we want to add more objectives to this quest. We want to be able to go, or we want it to have us go here, and then here, and then here. So to do that, we would just open up the quest and modify it a little bit. So open up the quest, and you can see our root objective is just creating the long way home, and then our populate objective is populating the root objective, but currently it's only adding 1 reach destination. So all we need to do is add 2 more of these. So let's just create a little sequence. I'm going to drag this over, hold down the S key and left click to create a sequence. You can also create this by right clicking and searching for sequence. So let's hook this up, and we're going to have 3 pins here, so we'll add another pin, and then we can just copy this code twice rather, and then hook this up to here and hook this up to here. But obviously we don't want them to all be reach Megaton, so this one we'll call reach anchorage and reach Springville. And then we want to change these, so delete this, and right click on this destination and promote it to a variable. And we will call this anchorage trigger, and make sure you select our 4 checkboxes, and then do the same for this one and call it Springville trigger, and then select the checkboxes, and then we should be good. So now we just need to come back here and select this guy and specify our anchorage trigger and our Springville trigger. And just like that, we've updated our quest to now support 3 different locations. And real quick before we run it here, just so we can go back and double check, if we open up this quest and we go back to our root objective, we can see we have this checkbox checked for order required. So when we run it now and we come over here and we take a look, you can see that a long way home still looks pretty much the same as it did before. We still just see the 1 reach Megaton, but and that's because it's specified that we're doing it in order. So if we go to Anchorage and we go to Springville and we take a look, it's not actually any different. But if we go to Megaton, which is the first thing we had to do, then it tells us, okay, now you need to go to Anchorage. And so if we go to Anchorage, it says, now you need to go to Springville. And so we go to Springville, and now we've completed the whole quest. And you can see they turn white each time you complete one, and then once they're all completed, the topmost one returns white as well. Okay, so that is the first quest completed. So the next thing we want to do is another example, because at this point the system is, I think the system is pretty much done. I don't want to say that because I don't want people to leave the tutorial yet, because I might be forgetting something, because we need to finish the other example before I can confidently say everything's working. But I think we're pretty much done with the main system now. So at this point, I'm just going to make another example for turning on lights and show you guys how that would work. And it also shows how objectives work when they're not required to be executed in order. So to do that, let's go back to the objective tab, or the objective folder rather, and inside of here, let's make a new objective for turning on a light. Oh, we already have one. So we already have this, so let's just open this up. So inside of here, well, actually, before we can do this, we need to create the light itself. So we're going to create a quick little light blueprint. just to show you guys how that would look. So let's come back here, and let's just do this outside of the folder. Let's just create it somewhere. So blueprint class, actor, and we'll call it VP underscore light. And so this is just going to be a real quick and dirty blueprint just for turning on and off a light, just so we can have something to interact with. So inside of here, we want to add a static mesh. So static mesh, and this is going to be our lamp. I use the ceiling lamp, quite fond of this ceiling lamp. And then inside of the static mesh, we want to add a point light. So we'll say point light. And then around the whole thing, we want to add a sphere. So click on the default scene root and add a sphere. And we're going to be using this for a collision, well, a sphere collision rather. And then we want this to be a little bit bigger so we can actually interact with it. So click on the sphere and change the radius to something like 180 or so. And so the idea is that once the player gets within this sphere, they can interact with the light. So if we come back to the event graph here, and we want to add a few things. So basically, like I said, when the player overlaps with that sphere, we want to enable collision, or we want to enable input for the light so that the player can interact with it. So to do that, we can really just delete all this stuff. So for the sphere, we just want to say right-click, add event, on component begin overlap, and we want to check if it overlapped with the player. So we'll cast to third-person character. So if it was the player that overlapped with the light, then we want to enable input on the light. So to do that, you can say enable input. So the target is going to be ourselves, but it wants the player controller, and that we can get from here. So we'll say get controller, and then we can cast this to a player controller since we know it's a player controller. So cast to player controller. And then since we know it's going to succeed, we can just right-click and convert it to a pure cast and hook that up and hook that up. And then the next thing we want to do is that when we stop overlapping with it, we want to disable input. So again, we'll right-click on this and say on component and overlap. And we want to do basically the same thing. So copy at least these three nodes, copy and paste, hook that up, and hook up our other actor. And then this time we just want to call disable input, and then make sure you have the player controller going into the player controller and not the target. Okay, so now that's handling the input, and then the last thing we need to do is just toggle the visibility of the light. So let's say if they press the F key, so we'll say input key F, and then find the F key. We just want to toggle the visibility of the light. So drag in the point light and say toggle visibility. That up, like so. And let's actually make it off by default. So click on the point light and search for visibility and uncheck it so that it's off by default. And then the final thing we're going to need, and we're going to need this kind of later, is we just need a handy little function to tell us if the light is currently on. And that's mostly just for the UI, so he'll have access to that. Or not the UI, that's mostly for the objective. So the objective will be able to tell if it's completed or not, depending on if the light is on. So just make a really simple function real quick. So hit function and just say is on, question mark. And then we can just make this pure and const since it's just basically a getter. And we're going to say get the point light. And then we'll say get visibility or get visible. And we just want to return that. So we'll drag this onto here and that'll give us an output pin. And then we'll hook up the output pin. Okay, so that's our light. We can test it out real quick. So let's drag in our light into the world. Oh, it's kind of upside down, isn't it? Let's turn it the other way around here real quick. So let's take the static mesh and rotate it. And then maybe we should move this point light as well. Where is our point light? Our point light is down here. Let's move our point light up to the top somewhere. Okay. So if we run this, oh wait, I didn't add it. Oh yeah, I did. Okay, so it's right here. So if I go over to my light and I press F, you can see it turns on. If I press F again, it turns off. If I'm too far away, it doesn't do anything. So now that we have our light working, we can actually set up our objective for turning on a light. So let's go back to our BP objective turn on light and continue where we left off. And let me open it on my other one real quick. If I can find it. Okay, there it is. So for this one, you just kind of got to think like, okay, what am I trying to do here? I want this objective to return completed whenever the light is turned on, or if the light is turned on, basically. So we can override our function for get is completed. And again, we want to return true if the light is on. So the first thing we're going to need is a reference to a light. So we'll add a variable over here and call it our light. And it is going to be of type BP light, which is the blueprint we just created. And we want to set this to instance editable, blueprint read only, expose on spawn, and private. And again, same reasons as before, because it's something we're going to be changing per instance of this quest. So we can simply just drag this in, and we'll say is on. And if it's on, then we'll consider it complete, right? So if the light is on, then the quest is complete. Pretty straightforward, right? And again, this is just an example. So if you had something for killing something, you could check, is it dead or does it exist? And then you can return complete if that's the case. And then I think that might be all we really need in here, because we don't really need to do anything when it's activated. Like we have options, like we could override this activate to maybe say only count, or like only start listening for the is on event, like when the quest becomes active. But for this, I don't really care. Like if they turn on the lights before the quest starts, then more power to them. They've completed the quest, right? So that is pretty much good to go. So now we can come back here to our content folder and make a new quest for this. So let's come to our system, or our quest system, and go into quests, and then we'll make a new quest. So right click on quest and say create child blueprint, and we'll call it BP underscore quest underscore 2 for quest number 2. You could maybe name these better than I am, but like light quest or whatever, but this is fine. Okay, so let's open this guy up. And the first thing we want to do, just like we did for the other quests, and this is kind of the pattern you'll get into once you start creating a lot of quests, is we want to override our construct root objective collection, because we always need to do that. And we want to override our populate objectives, because we always need to do that. So for construct root, we don't want this parent one, because that's just prints the error, if you remember. So we want to construct our root collection. So we'll say construct object. And then the object we want to construct is obviously our OBJ collection. And then we want to make sure that we return this. And so here, the outer is going to be ourself. The outer is always just yourself, basically. So order required. So for this particular quest, I don't care about the order, because they can turn on the lights in any order they want. So I'm just going to leave this as false. And the objective name, this is basically the quest name. So we'll give it something cool like lighting a path or something like that, right? So, so it's complaining about the other function. So this one's complete. So we need to go to our populate objectives. And we don't need this one, again, because that just calls into the parent function, which just prints an error. So for populate objectives, what we want to do is we want to create a turn on light objective per each light. So we need to get access to the lights. So let's go ahead and create a variable for that. So variable, and we'll call it lights. And we'll just make this an array of lights. So we'll say BP underscore light. And we'll hit this little drop down and change it to an array. So these are all of our lights. And then again, we need this to be editable in the editor and per instance. So we'll select all of these guys again, and we want it to be private. So pretty straightforward. We're just going to loop over all these guys and create an objective for each one of them. So we'll say for each loop. So for each light, we want to call construct object from class. And then this time we want to pass in our obj create, or not create, obj turn on light. And you can see as soon as we select that, it populates us with some new pens. So it's asking, okay, what's the light you want to turn on? And that's, of course, our array element. Outer is self, like always, so we'll just say self. The objective name we will call turn on light. But the thing here is that we'd like to be able to say turn on light 1, turn on light 2, turn on light 3. So in order to do that, we will use this array index. So we can drag off this and say format text. And then if you've never used this before, it's kind of cool. You can basically type whatever you want to type. So we'll say turn on light. And then if you want to add a variable, because we want it to be a variable, you use these curly braces, which is just shift and then bracket. And then whatever you type inside of here will show up as a variable. So if I type index, for example, and press enter, you can see it now puts another pin here. And so I can just drag this in. So it's going to say turn on light, and then it's going to print out whatever the value of index is. But index is going to start at 0, and we really don't want to use 0 as the first one because usually you don't show that to the user. Usually people like to count from 1. So we'll say int plus integer, and we'll just add 1. So that way it will say, turn on light 1, turn on light 2, turn on light 3, and so on, depending on how many lights you have. So now that we have the objective constructed, we just need to add it to our root collection, which gets passed in. So we'll say get root objective collection and add objective, like so. And we can hook that up, and we should be good to go. So the one thing we do need to do first is we need to make sure that we set these lights to something. So if we come back here, we need to drag in our quest 2, which is the one for the lights. Just doesn't really matter, just drag it into the scene somewhere. And then we can specify our lights. So currently we just have 1 light, so let's add a couple more. I'm just going to Alt and drag a few times, so now we have 4 lights. And then select this guy and make 4 entries, and then select our lights. So light 1, light 2, light 3, and light 4. And then we'll file save all, and then let's give this a try. So if we run it now and we press tab, you can see we now have 2 objectives. We have a long way home, which just shows reach megaton, and we have lighting a path, which shows turn on light 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if we close this, come over here and we turn on this light and this light, and we can take a look. You can see lighting a path is still not lit up because it's not complete, but if you expand it, you'll see that we've turned on light 2 and we've turned on light 4, so we've made progress. And then we can even come over here and start on this quest, and now you can see that this quest has progress and this quest has progress. And as soon as I turn on all the lights, then lighting the path is now complete, and you can see they're all shown as complete. So yeah, I think that pretty much sums up everything. I don't think I've forgotten anything at this point. So if you're happy, you can stop watching now, but I did want to explain how I made that more complex quest that I showed in part 1. I'm not going to actually code anything, I'm just going to show you the code from my other project just so you can get an idea if you're still a little bit confused of how I did that. But I think for the most part, this is pretty much done. If you are leaving now, I just want to say thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please leave a like and subscribe. I also have a Patreon if you're interested in supporting me, and a Discord channel as well. All that information's in the description of this video. And thanks for watching. If you are sticking around, then I will show you a little bit of other code real quick from my other project. So the other project, it's literally the same code if you look at it. So I had this other thing over here, and it's a little bit more complex of a quest because you can see this explore the city has multiple layers. It has this one and then this one, so you can expand it twice. And if you want to do that, you don't have to add any more functionality. The functionality is already there. And so what that looks like, if we take a look at this quest over here, it's really not that complicated at all. So we open this up, you can see we have our 2 functions that we always override. Our construct root is just the same as it always is. I just don't require any order. And our populated objectives is where we do a little bit more work. So this is just telling the quest how it should behave and what objectives it should have. And I know it might look a little scary, but it's really quite easy. And I just wanted to go through it real quick in case anybody wasn't really sure. So all we're doing is we're saying, okay, we're going to construct the visit the green side and add that to the root. And then we're going to construct the visit the red side and add that to the root. So all that's done so far is constructed visit the green side and visit the red side. And you'll notice that when I construct these, I'm constructing them as object collections, right? I have object collection selected here. And I'm doing that because if you see this over here, visit the green side, it's not just an objective, it's a collection of objectives. So if you want to have objectives inside of objectives inside of objectives, whenever you want to do that, you would just need to make the uppermost one an objective collection. And so I'm saving that as visit the green side objective and visit the red side objective. So now that I have those created, I start populating the green side. So the first thing I do is I say, okay, I want to reach destination, and I'm going to add that to visiting the green side. And I also want another reach destination. I'm going to add that to the green side. And I want a turn on light, and I'm going to add that to the green side. And then I do the same thing for the red side. So I say I want to reach destination, and then I want an object collection. So you can add object collections to object collections, because if you see, I have visit the red side, and then, well, by default it doesn't show it, so let me come over here. So I visit the red side, and now it shows there's even another drop down. So it's like 4 layers deep. And all you need to do, like, you can go as deep as you want. You just need to keep adding object collections, and then you can specify per object collection whether or not the objects in that collection need to be executed in order. So you can see sometimes I have this true, sometimes I have it false, just depending on what I want. And so that's really all there is to it. And so, once I have those created, I just add them to their appropriate collection, and it just works. So you can really, hopefully you can make any changes that you need to this. Hopefully it'll be minor, but I tried to make it so that you guys could quite easily make any objective that you want and add it to the system without having to like really change anything fundamental. So yeah, so if you enjoyed the video, like I said, please leave a like and subscribe. Consider supporting me on Patreon. Definitely join my Discord channel. The link's in the description. If you have questions, I'll try to help you out as best as I can. Otherwise, I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks.